All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's great to finally meet you because this is how we meet each other nowadays, right? Through Zoom.
It
So
is.
why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization and what you're passionate about?
Well, my name is Ursula Eysin. I'm the CEO of Red Swan. You see it behind me
Very
here.
nice.
And our flagship, oh, thank you very much. Our flagship is the development of future scenarios.
Mm,
And as we are in very uncertain times right now, it's very popular. Until the pandemic hit, it was not that popular, I must say, because uncertainty is not popular. Let's be
yes.
honest, people hate uncertainty, and well, rightfully so, because it makes us insecure, it can cause anxiety. But if we accept that uncertainty is actually a gift and it's the realm of opportunities, especially for entrepreneurs,
Hmm.
then we can turn uncertainty into a big advantage. And that is what I do in my company. I do it for governmental organizations, international organizations, companies, startups, and even individuals to create the future, or better, let's say, to co-create the future, because we do not create the future in our own narcissistic bubble. I
Yeah.
think we co-create it with other people.
We try to, but it doesn't never work out because it's like
That's
plans. It's like plans never survive contact with the enemy, right? It's like as soon as
exactly.
you can plan something out to the nth degree, but then once you start in bringing in sort of the environmental factors, other people, etc., then things change. So it's interesting. You were saying you do all from government organizations all the way to large organizations and individuals. How do you can you do you use the same sort of process for all of them, or what do you? I mean, is there some kind
It's
of
all
core thing that
Yes.
is okay?
Yes,
Cool.
it's always the same steps.
Hmm.
The methodology, it's very interesting that you quote, I think it was Mike Tyson who said, everyone has a plan until they get smashed in the face
Yeah,
or hit in
exactly.
the face, punched in the face. And he's very right about that. And my methodology was originally called scenario planning,
Hmm.
but I rather call it scenario thinking because, as you said, it's not possible to plan the future. That's
Hmm.
really not possible. And it's also not about future predictions. The methodology was invented in the 1940s by the US military,
Hmm.
by the US Air Force, to be precise about that. And what does the military want to know? What could the enemy do? And this, what other people do, is actually one of the most uncertain things we face.
Hmm.
Human behavior is very uncertain. You cannot control it as much as people would like to control it with technology or other means. In the end, humans have free will, and human behavior is very uncertain. So the US Air Force came up with this methodology in which you first you frame the challenge. What is our challenge? What do you want to know? What kind of decisions do you need to make? And then the first step is you gather driving forces for this decision. This can be external driving forces, like we have now the economy, political decisions, but it can also be internal driving forces, like your own motivations, your core values, your core principles, which is actually very useful in times of crisis when you have core principles that can guide you like a beacon of light through stormy waters, so to say. So the next step is you analyze these driving forces because you want to know which of them are critical uncertainties of the future. And here the uncertainties come in again.
Hmm.
You do that, and it's a matrix. On the one side, you have the impact: is it high or low of this driving forces on your question, and the other is the uncertainty high or low? Is it already decided how this will work out? Is it a certain trend, so to say, or is it not decided yet? Is it still critical and uncertain, which means we still can co-create it, we still can change it? And this is what we like in the scenario process. We
Hmm.
take two of these critical, very significant uncertainties to form a so-called scenario cross, 2 dimensions, and these dimensions form 4 different scenarios.
Hmm.
And maybe to make this more practical, I did it for myself because I happened to attract a lot of bad business partners.
Oh no.
I had
Sorry to hear that.
Thank you. That's very kind of you to say. So I thought this has to stop. So I sat down, gathered my driving forces, and found my critical uncertainties. What do I want to see in a business partner?
Mhm.
And in my 2 dimensions are trust, and I define it as, can I trust in you to capitalize on my best interests? Yes or no?
Mhm.
And the other for me is striving for excellence. Is it low or strong? And these dimensions form 4 different scenarios or 4 types of business partners. The best one would be the empathic leader, someone who acts in my best interests and their own, and also strives for excellence, empathic leader. Someone who strives for excellence but does not capitalize on my best interest might be a goal-oriented psychopath. I tried that as well.
Oh no. Oh no. It's interesting. It's interesting you should mention that. I was reading an article the other day that said, why don't we use the term psychopath anymore? Because people used to use the word psychopath all the time, and now people say sociopath. And I'm like, I think those are 2 different things, but it's interesting how the
Yes.
English has changed. But sorry,
Yes,
go on. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, but I think the difference, because that's of course also interesting, a psychopath is really very goal oriented. They are usually not the ones who go to prison, because it does not happen to them that they beat someone up or kill someone in public. And the sociopath, in my understanding, is more the guy who punches you in the face in the bar and then really goes to prison. So I think that's kind of, but as far as I understand,
the one who gets away with it, right?
The goal-oriented psychopath is not in prison. That's the one who gets away with it.
Exactly.
So
terrible.
Another not so desirable species of business partners is the covert narcissist. I tried that as well.
Was this, you weren't doing this? It's almost like you're doing a social experiment to see what would happen.
In hindsight, it looks like that, but it was not intentional in the beginning. So this should also be avoided, of course, as someone who does not strive for excellence and but also doesn't capitalize on any other of your best interests. And then there are the supporters who might not strive for excellence, but are interested in capitalizing on other best interests of yours. So these 4 different scenarios, I figured them out. I had tried them all before. And
not on purpose. Not on purpose.
Not on purpose. So I had already acted them out. And this is the next step. When you have these scenarios, you rehearse the future. You act these scenarios out. What would that look like? I already knew what it would look like because I already had tested them. So next is take inspired action steps. What did you learn from that, from all these scenarios? What do you want and what do you not want? What do you want to avoid? And what is it that you want to create in the future? And of course, for me, it was to have these empathic leaders as my business partners. But I found out that usually I go to network events where I find a lot of narcissists and psychopaths, because I used to work a lot in politics, in PR, in lobbying, and in the media business.
That's a hotbed of those. That's all you're going to get, right?
That's why. And this was my network. So every time I went to network meetings, I jumped right in, took a deep dive in the same community again. So I decided I have to change that. So I actively looked for other communities, for other people, for other network meetings, and I changed that, and I was successful with that.
Very nice. Well, congratulations. I'm glad.
Oh, thank you.
That's good. So it's interesting what you mentioned, that your methodology seems to be kind of simplistic when it comes to thinking about the future, because from my perspective, a lot of times when you when you say to people, oh, I'm going to do scenario planning, or I'm going to think about this, they go, well, how can you possibly do that? There's millions of possible ways that this could go. How can you just take sort of a two-axis thing and say this is the way things are going? And I think I know what your answer is going to be, but I'd love to hear what your thoughts are.
It's necessary to focus on these two dimensions. I mentioned that the first step is to gather driving forces. And in this phase of the whole process, we really gather a lot of driving forces. When we do this as a huge stakeholder process for governmental organizations, for example, we take a whole day, a lot of sticky notes, and it's really full. You have driving forces, and you take a whole 360 view of all driving forces that could influence your decision. So it's really, really a lot. In this phase, you gather a lot of driving forces. For the scenario cross, that's of course, people very often say, oh, we need more dimensions.
Yeah.
And I can tell them, yes, we tried that all. We tried it with technology, and but it's really a good exercise to focus on these two dimensions. And usually these are two very significantly different dimensions. And a lot of your other driving forces lead to these dimensions. So it's when you act out the scenarios, when you describe them, the other driving forces, the other critical uncertainties you analyzed are not lost. You bring them in again. So it's, of course, I taught the whole story in a simplistic way, but there are, of course, a lot of driving forces that made me choose trust and striving for excellence for my core dimensions. So this doesn't get lost. So in big scenario processes, which involve a lot of people, a lot of perspectives, you bring in all these driving forces, and you think how they would develop in the different scenarios, in the 4 different scenarios. So this does not get lost. And it's, of course, then it's more complicated again. But you create something like scenario narratives, scenario stories, because that's like people can get a grasp of it.
Oh, yeah.
It's very hard, as you said. It can be very, very complicated, and as far as I know, our mind cannot grasp more than 7-8 different scenarios, for example. So we also try not to have more than 7 different sections. Of course, there are a lot of things that might describe these sections. What is trust, for example? But it should not be too much. So it's an exercise in discipline, so to say.
So you say the driving forces actually, when you gather all the driving forces, is that where the axes come from? It's like you can actually see it coming together when you pull the driving forces together. You say, oh, okay, I can see where the axes are coming from based on that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And they come, as I said, there's another step in between. You freely gather all driving forces you can think of, then you cluster them, and then you analyze them, and you sort out the ones that cannot be changed in the future, because it would not make much sense to develop different scenarios for things you already think are certain in the future. If you already
so there's
know
a certain percentage of
yes.
certainty. You go, okay, this is
Yes.
this is really realistically definitely going to happen, and this one, you know, you never know 100%, obviously, but there's okay.
But there are certainties, for example, existential angst. People have a lot of existential angst, so this is something certain that will not change in those different scenarios.
That's right.
That would make much sense to have it in different scenarios. All other things, I must say, most of the things are uncertain now. Even, like, of course, you can say, okay, political regulation is pretty certain now. But then, of course, you can also say, yeah, but let's think like 20, 30, 40 years ahead. Can we influence it? And then, of course, you can influence a lot of things. So many things are not as certain as we think now. we can change them, especially we think 10, 20, 30, 40 years in the future, not because we think that we can predict the future 10, 20 years ahead. It's because it enables out of the box thinking.
Yeah.
If you ask the manager what will happen in a year, they already know what will happen because they have the benchmarks. And so this is not very creative. But back to we had the certainties, you sort out the things. I also think in general, you should sort out the things you cannot change. I think people waste a lot of time with trying to change things they cannot change.
Right.
So that's why I love to work with the uncertainties so much. These are things you can change. It's people always get this bad feeling when you talk about uncertainty, but this is the realm of opportunity. This is where you can create your future. And this is very important. So these dimensions are, of course, come from these critical uncertainties of the future. And they are critical, they're uncertain.
I'm curious about what you like your definition of something that cannot change, because from my perspective, anything can happen. The only question is when, right? We have to have the drive to say this needs to change. But I mean, when you talk about something that's definitely unchanging, I guess you just mean unchanging within the time frame that you're talking about.
Yeah,
like,
yes,
so for example, we're not going to have solar power. We're not going to have solar power everywhere tomorrow, because it's just not physically possible
happening.
Right? Okay.
That's right. Of course, that's also something you define in the beginning. Do you want to look 5, 10, 20, 60 years ahead? Sometimes, for example, in the energy business, as you already mentioned it, energy companies usually look 60 years into the future, because they have to think of investments now to build things 60 years in the future. So this is for them is very normal to do that. For other businesses like the electronics business, 5 years may be good.
5 years might be too long for them.
Yeah, it should be 5 years at least. But yes, you're right. It might already be too long. But it just doesn't make sense like to do it for 1 or 2 years. As I mentioned, that you have the short-term management goals, and managers already know what will probably happen.
So I'm curious, because in the future's business, a lot of times organizations say to you, well, that's all beautiful, that's all great, but I'm concerned about what's going to happen next quarter, next month, next year. How do you convince companies that it's really important to look this far out? I mean, obviously the ones you've been talking to they get it, but I mean, how do you get to the rest of the folks who are like, it's really important for them to look that far out, but they're not looking that far out?
Yes, my big advantage is that I turn uncertainty into an advantage now, not in the future. And though this is called future scenarios, I do not consider myself to be in the forecasting business or in futurology. I think that's very different. I want to change things now. And I think this is the big advantage, because I totally understand. I myself would say, but I want to change my business partnerships now, not in 10, 20 years in the future.
Exactly.
But we play to it is a very useful exercise to think out of the box and to change things now. It's good to really rehearse the future and play it until the end, especially the bad scenarios. This is also a question I get many times, sometimes when I do not prepare them. Oh, why are 3 of our scenarios so bad? Well, happens a lot when we do technology scenarios, because there are a lot of things we have to think about now, and a lot of things we have to be careful about, we have to care about, and things we might not be able to change later when we do that now. So there are scenarios that really go down the hill, like technology controlling everything, imprisoning everyone. We have to make decisions now to not get into the worst case scenarios, especially with technology.
Yeah.
I'm a technology consultant of more than 20 years. I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of technology. If we do not take these decisions now, it's just too late. A good example for me is when people suggest that you have tracking apps. For what reason ever. Different. I lived in China. My first major was sinology. And I had the pleasure to have a first-hand experience of a full surveillance state.
Oh, wow.
And that's really not very funny when all your phone calls, your Skype calls, your room is surveyed all the time.
Jeez.
That's really not very
It's
funny.
not something we're used to here.
That's right. That's
but
right.
It's
so
probably happening.
So how many have a Huawei phone, for example?
Yeah, exactly.
So you have the Chinese state in your pocket. But it's really important that we think, especially when technology comes into play, we have to decide, do we want to use that or do we not want to use that? Once you have it on your phone, it's very hard to take a step back.
Oh, yeah.
When it's rolled out everywhere, how do you do it? If it's a technology, and that's why you should think early on, now, today, do we want that? Do we want to get in this scenario? Yes or no? So for me, it's very easy. If someone offers me a tracking app, I say no. Yeah, but you cannot go on vacation if you do not do it. Then I do not go on vacation.
Well, I think you see, this is interesting that you should say that, because on the one hand, sort of all of this constant surveillance will allow us to help ourselves more. Because if you think about futures like, in Wall-E or something like that, where, everything's catered to you, and obviously you don't have to necessarily be super fat, but what happens is that your systems that are all around you are smart enough to be able to anticipate your needs and to be able to provide for you, right? So there are plus sides to the technology, but that requires the full surveillance. So that can be subverted in many different ways. So the question is, do you go down this path so you can get the positive aspects of your technology catering to you, or do you not go down the path because you want the privacy? And I think Scott McLeany said privacy is already gone, right? That's already out of the bottle. So I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, I know there's probably devices tracking us now. Zoom tells me this is not going through China, but do I believe them? Right? I mean, that's the question, right?
Yes. I work a lot with cybersecurity experts, and they usually say, you should just assume that you are surveilled. Yeah. All the time. Yeah. So act like that. Yeah. And as I had this experience in China, I always live like that. But on the other hand, yes, sometimes when people say, oh, privacy is already gone, is it? It's not yet. It's not yet. We still can do something. And that's exactly, we are in a very exciting time to be alive. We have to take a lot of decisions, and we should not be so lazy, we as human beings, to hand that all to technology, because that's the next step. People want to take that decision making to give it to technology. AI should take the decision. It cannot take the decision for you. And also, that's human agency. Human agency, we should not give to technology, because this is very human. Taking decisions, we take like thousands of decisions every day. No, the little decisions to look left or right, or really, that's very human, and this also defines us. We define, with every click we make, we define what we see next on the internet.
That's really interesting. Go ahead.
Yes.
So, no, I mean, if you're because I'm of two minds of this. On the one hand, it's kind of like we make so many decisions that we probably don't really need to make, because so much work is, and this is the thing with the internet, is like, do you remember the days prior to the internet when you wanted to book travel, you just call your travel agent and say, hey, I want a
I
nice
missed
trip.
that.
I want a nice trip. Can you give me a nice trip? And they give you a beautiful trip, right? And
Mm,
now it's
mm,
like everything's pushed to you. So you have to spend hours and hours and days doing all the research and all of that stuff. And I mean, I don't know if I want AI doing it. I'd rather have a human doing it. But it seems like technology on the one hand has made life easier, but it's also made life harder because now we all have the agency to do everything. And it's like, I'd love to have
That's so true. Yes. And that we come back to what are your core values or your core principles.
Mhm.
And as I developed a lot of technology scenarios, I have some core principles for that. And for me, it is technology should be in the benefit of human beings and in the
Exactly.
benefit of the growth and development of human beings.
Mhm.
So everything that dumps us down is definitely not good. Then what you mentioned, I think that's really a bad thing. I wrote a whole column about that. That service providers let you do the service,
Yep.
and that's not okay because you still pay them. You
Exactly.
still pay them. I think a good examples are airlines. I
Mhm.
mean, what is the next step? Uh, fly yourself to the destination or walk yourself to the
Exactly.
destination. It's really they do nothing. It's like you want a seat, really. Yeah, you will not
Yeah.
allow me to stand on the flight, right? So
Exactly.
this is
Exactly.
really, this went too far, the whole self service. This is not a good understanding for technology. I think technology is very good on the back end for in customer service, for example. On the back
Mhm.
end, that's very good. If they have an automated ticket service and they know you already called 3 times and this is what you want, that would be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
But this is usually not applied. But they try to have technology on the front end, and on the front end you need humans. You
Yeah.
need compassion. You need validation. You need empathy. You do not want to have the machine on the front end.
Yeah.
So I
Unless
think
they,
a
of
lot of
course, unless you have a machine working for you as well. See, I think this is what's happening is that yeah, I've been working I've been working for hospitality chains and other things, other companies, and we were talking about revenue management. And revenue management is sort of like the science of pricing things perfectly so that the company makes as much money as possible. Like they don't really care what the customer wants, unless it's got to be palatable to the customer. But if you think about it, all this AI is being used by all these giant organizations, or tons of money is being spent. So these giant organizations can create amazingly huge AI that like fights against the customer, right? So like that Expedia front end that you're seeing, there's so much technology back there to try and make it worse for you. And I'm like, oh,
yes.
I'm just a poor human. I wish there was some AI on my side that would go up against their AI and go, hey, you guys duke it out and get me the right deal or something like that. But
You're exactly right,
yeah,
and that's technology fighting against the customer,
yeah,
and that's
exactly.
exactly what I say.
Hmm.
Technology should be for the benefit of people, and I think there's still great technology to come,
Hmm.
but not AI fighting against people or
Yeah.
fighting against the customer. It's really it seems like a way to keep the customer away,
Hmm.
so nobody talks to the customer. And you also mentioned something very interesting. People always say, oh, the technology makes everything so much easier. You mentioned a very good example. We just used to call the travel agent and they booked everything for us. Now you have to do everything yourself. The whole responsibility is on you. So this is
Hmm.
also a main driving force. So take responsibility. We have to take the responsibility for the things we are responsible for, and the company should take responsibility for things that they are responsible for.
Yeah,
And in an
exactly.
airline, I'm not responsible for flying myself to the destination, right? This
Hmm.
should be the captain. I'm also not qualified to do that.
Yeah.
And so I think this is not good. And also it made things more complicated. Also for booking tickets. It was
Hmm.
so easy to go to a soccer game in Europe. You just go there, buy the ticket, and that's it. Now you can do it online.
Yeah.
Oh, that made it so much easier. It did not. It did not. You have many things, and you have many things you have to choose from. And then, of course, what happens? This is always a very good example. What happens if this great technology just runs out of energy?
Mhm.
And in times where there could be a blackout and you cannot recharge it,
Yep.
then all this nice, oh, I have my tickets here on the phone, it's gone.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
totally gone.
No, I mean, it seems like we need some kind of personal AI or some kind of personal technology that can sort of take our fight to them, because it's just our poor humans. It's kind of like when you think about Facebook feeds and Instagram feeds and stuff like that. If you think about this, if this was a drug, it would be illegal, because it's
Yes,
creating
it
this.
makes you so,
Yeah, it makes you
yes,
so addicted to the
addictive.
stream.
Yes,
Yeah, and that's
absolutely. If that was a drug, it would be illegal, and it should be illegal.
yeah.
And that's the other thing. The big tech social platforms, which is a specialty in technology.
Hmm.
I think this is very interesting because people say, oh, they are the big innovators. Well, the technology was already old when they used it. And
Yeah,
that's usually very common when you take a technology to the market. It's not brand new, because if it would be a real invention, it would take you like 30 years to develop it in a way that it can hit the market.
exactly.
So what they did, is all platform technology, and it was already there for 20, 30 years when they invented it.
Hmm.
So it's not, the technology is not a huge invention. The way they use it and the influence they have is really mind-boggling.
Yeah.
And what they are doing with the addiction, this is something I'm also teaching, these things like digital communication. I
Hmm.
think people should know about that these they really have mechanisms that make you addicted, and they want to keep you there as long as they can, because their revenue comes from advertisement. And as long as they do not change the revenue model, why should they change the algorithm, or
Yeah,
why should they change these addictive models? But
exactly.
you're very right. People are getting addicted, and it's very addictive, even to
Hmm.
people who are not prone to fall for addictions.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's crazy.
Well, it's like they're using all of this amazing technology to make us more addicted to the technology. It's like, can't we just put somebody on the moon or go to Mars or something like that? Like, do something that will really improve humanity, or improve human flourishing. Well, maybe not going to Mars, but
Yes,
there's lots of problems that we could apply this technology to. But no, we're just trying to keep people scrolling on their phones. It's
that's right.
unfortunate, isn't
That's
it?
it is, and that really angers me a lot, because I believe in technology as a form of human innovation,
Hmm.
and also of a form of breaking the limits to growth.
Hmm.
As long as we can invent, and I think that's also a very human specialty. We are creative, we are innovative, we are curious, and we always find new ways to overcome obstacles. That's why we develop bad scenarios. You have
Yeah.
obstacles, and then you are creative and find new solutions to that.
Yeah.
And I would really like to see great technology in the benefit of human beings, helping human beings to flourish.
Hmm.
And I think that's totally possible. And there are so many technologies still to be developed. I would like to see free energy supply for everyone,
Hmm.
for example.
Hmm.
Why don't we work on that
Well, I
instead
think
of
that's the
making
bit that's the
people
big
addicted?
problem. I think you're absolutely right. I think power, energy, that is sort of like underlying the foundation of almost everything. If we could
It
figure out
is.
better ways
It's
of doing that, and there's so much more than solar, and there's so many other
Yes,
technologies out
yes,
there.
yes, yes. There's still a lot in storage, for example. As long
Hmm.
as we cannot store it, it's a problem. If we have solar and wind, and when the sun
Hmm.
doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow, what do we do?
Exactly.
So we need good storage. So this is something that, of course, there are people who are doing that, and but I would like to see more of that. I
Hmm.
would like to see more technology that really helps people and is not like just making them addicted, dumbing them down, numbing them down.
Yeah.
I think that's really that's why we should think about the future now, because we have
Absolutely.
to decide that now.
So a couple of things that you said earlier, I wanted to dig into a little more. You were talking about when you first started working with someone, you have to get sort of the directions they want to go in. Have you ever done something where, okay, I'm not particularly interested in the directions, but I want you to sort of give me some scenarios on where things are going in general? Or do you always start with, these are the goals that we're trying to reach?
I always start with framing the challenge. What do you really want to know?
Mm-hmm.
And if someone says, just give me some general directions, I would say then go to a trend analyst. This is really something I do not do.
Right.
I use it, of course, for the certain trends. I also look into prognosis and forecasts. That, of course, is valuable and has its place. But it's different from what I do. And what I do is more about turning uncertainty into an advantage. And I think it's really important for human beings. We have to tackle uncertainty in a better way. Why? Because then there cannot be a company who makes us afraid of something. Because we are not afraid. If we can tackle uncertainty, we know it will turn out in our favor in one way or the other. There might be obstacles and there might be pain, but in the end, we can overcome the obstacles. And if we are not afraid of uncertainty, there can neither the media nor politics nor other people can make us fear the fears they want us to fear. Just one word on fear. The instinctual fear is very useful. It makes you survive. To know you cannot just cross the street and not die if you look around. That's a good
useful.
fear. That's a very useful fear. It makes you survive long enough to have useful thoughts and create new things. But the media business creates a lot of fear. It's really like terrorizing people every day. They tell you, the news basically is, they tell you what you have to be afraid of today.
Yeah,
and that
exactly.
And to step out of that is
today
so
your
important.
fears will be that.
Yes. And they have new fears every day.
That's right. Got to keep those fears fresh.
Yes, yeah. It has to be. It has to be kept fresh.
What new fear do we have today? Oh, yeah, forget about that fear from yesterday. Now it's the opposite.
Forget about that. Now that's also very true. Now be afraid of the opposite.
That's right.
So, and that's also maybe in all the things I did, like coming from the media business and politics and doing the future scenarios now. I like to bring that all together because I think it's so important for people to understand how the media works, how politics works, how the economy works. And in these future scenarios, I bring that all together and hopefully make people understand how they can hit them back or just not be afraid and not do what they want them to do.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me that old the difference between fear and anxiety is being strapped on the rails in front of the train is fear, but thinking about being strapped on the rails in front of the train is anxiety.
Yes, and that's a very good example. And the media does just that. They say, "Oh, but now imagine." It's not. You are safe in your living room, but now imagine someone shot you in the face.
That's right. But it's like, and that's the other thing. It's like news. People think, oh my God, this is all this horrible stuff is happening, but they don't understand that news is something that hardly ever happens. Because if it happened all the time, then they wouldn't bother reporting on it. So you keep hearing about all this horrible stuff going on, but the reality is that it's super rare. I mean, when you look at people like Steven Pinker, and there's other thought leaders who statistically said, okay, here's all the violence that's happening in the world over the last so many years, and it's a downward curve, and it's continuously downward curve, and all that's happened is that the reporting on it has become more frenzied. So there's more reporting on less things happening. So it makes people perceive that things are getting worse and worse and worse when they really aren't.
Yes, and also we talked about responsibility. I think the media should take more responsibility. There is you could call this an ethical principle in the media business, usually that they do not report on suicides, for example, because of the copycat effect, that so many people would copy the same thing. And I think media, they deviate from that more and more. They do that. They report on things, and then you have the next guy, the next school shooter, and the next school shooter, and the next terrorist. From communication principles, they should not report so much on that because of this copycat effect, because you will have people who think, oh, okay, I could do that as well. And that's just a fact. They know about that.
Yeah.
So I would say they should take more responsibility for that.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, I mean, the whole industry just preys on human fear, right? If it wasn't for human fear, and if we weren't so afraid of things, that's why it's like people go, oh, I would like to read a service where there's nice news, right? Like good news. But nobody would watch that because we're so attuned to the negative as human beings. There's sort of like an instinctual human thing that when a negative thing comes up, we immediately pay attention to that compared to something that's positive. It's kind of like when they took those AIs and they put them on Twitter, and immediately within like 20 minutes, they turned, sexist, racist, all of that stuff. And it's not because human beings are sexist and racist. I think it's because people communicate sexism and racism for effect so that they can get attention. And then the bot sees that and goes, oh, humans must be more like this. So it went crazy going, well, humans are like this. Well, no, we're just doing this to get your attention.
Yes. It reinforces the same thing, and then again and again and again. Yes, I once talked to a professor, Mark Bishop is his name, and he also has a YouTube video on that. He says that he's much more afraid of artificial stupidity than of artificial intelligence. And I think he's quite right about that. What you just described is such an example of artificial stupidity. It just reinforces the same patterns again. And they even call that, AI scientists call that reinforcement patterns.
Yeah.
And of course, I think of reinforcing good patterns, but as you said, it's also a phenomenon that people usually tend to comment more on the negative side than on the positive side. So you will always, the algorithm takes data. It does not judge on the data. It takes data and it reinforces the patterns it finds. And that would only be good news if our social patterns would be so great.
Yeah.
But when you look at history, as Winston Churchill once said, history is one damn thing after the other. So
I love that.
I would not like to create that in the future. So this is why we cannot keep taking yesterday's data to create the future. And that's also why I don't think that AI will create the future. AI takes yesterday's data and tries to recreate the patterns it finds. And as the patterns are not that nice, well, we cannot rely on that.
Exactly. We have to rely on us instead of them. And so the one thing I want to mention in your notes, it says something about you're able to pull up things from people's subconscious. How do you do that? Did you is it hypnotism, or what is it? How does that work?
I just make them aware. In this process, this is also why I like it so much. You bring the subconscious things to the conscious minds, and it's really it's no hypnosis or anything like that. It's just by writing these driving forces out. For example, you become aware of, as I mentioned, I gave you this example of the business partners I would want to have in my business instead of the psychopaths and narcissists. You write out these driving forces. This is already a very good exercise, because bringing pen to paper brings together the subconscious and the conscious mind. This is really good. This is also why we should, in the schools, we should not only have computers for the children. It's very important to really bring pen to paper. It's a different process in the brain.
Agreed.
And you write that out. And this is the first thing, and then you analyze it, and then you have these different scenarios. You act them out. This is also something. You make things aware. You are, especially when you are acting out or telling stories, a lot of things you come out of your mouth you might not have consciously thought of.
Yeah.
So this is very nice, and for me, it's always very interesting when I have a huge group of people, and then they stand in front of their scenarios, and they say, you know what? I thought this scenario is the best scenario, but now I think it's completely different. I have a complete change in perspectives. And this is what we want to reach with this process. It's not about predicting the future. It's about a change in perspectives. And I think that's very important. That's also why I love to bring a lot of different people together, because the more perspectives we have, the closer we come to the truth.
By the way, I do love Red Swan. That's such a great concept. Is there such a thing? I know there's black and I know there's white. Is there such a thing, or did you just invent that?
You mean the black swan?
No, the red swan. Is there such a thing as a red swan? I guess there is, right? In real life?
I don't think so. And and it's also part of the concept that there is no such thing.
I love it. I love it. So you were talking about about the.
But let me just explain the red swan. There's this book by Nassim Taleb called Black Swan. It's about black swan scenarios, and black swan scenarios are scenarios which are very unlikely to happen but have a huge impact. He personally does not think that the pandemic was a black swan, but there are other black swans. You might imagine, like,
I think we've all experienced them in our lives. But it's almost like, those of us who don't look at signals and scenarios and are very observant are more surprised, I think, because from my perspective, life is change, life is uncertainty. So when uncertainty comes along, it's like, yeah, whatever. I know, that's why I have this thought that anything will occur, everything will happen. The only question is when. So whatever happens, I'm not really too surprised by it. But there's plenty of people who are just blindsided by these events, and it's just because they haven't really been observant on what's happening, right?
That's right. Yes.
Anyway, so speaking about predictions, it's let's think like a futurist. It's year 2032, 10 years from now. Where do you think the world will be in 10 years? I know you don't do predictions, but I thought it'd be interesting to dig into your mind and say, where do you think we'll be in 10 years? Do you think the world will have changed a lot?
I think we are at a lot of crossroads right now, in where the whole world will go, of course. And usually, I think decisive for that are our values, and values is a very difficult discussion when you have values as one dimension. We have that a lot for technology, because you need to have decisive or precise values for where you want to go. And of course, values are different in different cultures, and even every person has different values.
Absolutely.
I have a whole card deck of values. I think it's 150 values. And just to sort out what is really a core value, what is kind of a core value, and what is not so important, is very hard. And in different situations, we have different values. So I think we have to become clear about our values, about our core principles, what is really important for us, so that we can navigate to this future. Of course, as I said, we co-create the future. There are other people also deciding this. And I think at the moment, of course, it's very We are navigating through very uncertain times. And the other thing might be that we had this for technology scenarios also a lot. Are things regulated in a centralized way or organized in a very centralized or in a decentralized way? I think that might also be a crucial driving force for the future. Is it this direction or is it that direction? And other things, of course, do we care more about the collective or do we care more about the individual? And this is also something I like in the scenarios, because you do not have to decide. I think we have to develop something I would call end consciousness. This is usually this. We also see that in the scenarios that we as humans have this tendency that we always go from one extreme to the other. It's always like a pendulum swing. Always like a pendulum swing. It's like when you have a community full of collectivism, then people next will swing to total individualism. I'm in my narcissistic bubble. I do everything I want. And it's always one way or the other. And I think for the future, we have to come to this point where we see, in this case, this is more useful, and for this is more useful. And there are things that can be organized in very decentralized ways, and there are things that can be organized in more centralized ways, but we have to decide according to our values what that is. So as I said, I do not do future predictions because it can change, and the more, I think, the more you grow, the more open you are, the more conscious you are, the more uncertain it is for you, because you are still influencing it. For other people, it might be more determined, but for people who are very open-minded and try to evolve and grow all the time, it's very hard to predict that. It's really very hard, because they can change every day. And this is, I think, also our freedom of choice. We can change our life every day. You can wake up and live a different life.
Be a different person.
Change a lot. You can be a different person.
And I love the analogy you mentioned earlier. It's like sort of like human beings like black and white because it's simple, but life is not like that. Reality is not like that. So we try to take super complex, the super complexity of life, and we try to simplify it into black and white, and it just doesn't work. So there's always that. And I think that's why you're swinging back and forth, because you go, oh, let's try black, let's try white, let's try black, but life is sort of somewhere in between, and it's changing all the time. So you can never hit the target, and every time we don't hit targets, we get unhappy. So we just have to understand it's a moving target, and there's very little chance we're going to hit it, and be good with that.
Exactly. It's a moving target, and I would rather have people understand that than trying to predict the future. It's a moving target. You can influence it. You can, the more aware you are, the more you can influence it, and on the other side, that doesn't mean that everything will go according to your plans. As we mentioned before, it's really not a wise thing to try to plan the future. And it's also, I think, a very powerless position to do that. It's a very powerless position to try to predict the future, because then you think that it's already determined and you are only be tossed around by life. And I would rather believe we still have a say in it, and that we can co-create the future with other people, and also with people with other perspectives. Because, of course, first thing we would like to say is, let's create our future together with like-minded people. Yes, that's good, but there are also people who have different perspectives, and this is very valuable. And as I said before, we live in very exciting times. I think that what we see in our scenarios, the next 10 years will be times of big changes, times of big uncertainty, times maybe of one crisis after the other. And this is not to be pessimistic or to paint the future in gray and black. I would rather have people understand that hope can destroy your life. It's better to be aware that there might be 10 tough years
Yeah.
to bring it down to earth. And there's a very good example. It's called the Stockdale paradox. Do you know about that?
Mm-mm.
Stockdale was an officer of the U.S. military in the Vietnam War, and he and his troop got captured by the Viet Cong, and they were tortured for 10, 11 years.
Oh, geez.
And yes, eventually he got free, and they got back to the US. And he is very often asked, how do you survive something like that? And he usually answers, I can tell you who did not survive that. And who did not survive that were the people who were always hopeful, who always said, oh, on Christmas we will be home.
Right.
And oh, on Easter we will be home. And
Yeah.
they died of broken hearts.
Right.
Their hopes were smashed again and smashed again and smashed again. So I would rather not do that to people, like say, oh, everything will be fine. Rather face the fact it might be tough times, but it's a very exciting time. You can co-create the future. There will be a lot of obstacles, especially for entrepreneurs. It's a rough and tough surrounding, but maybe some people can find some excitement in that.
Yeah.
Others may not. Others may say, I hate it, but it's still better to not have this hope that will break your heart. It's better to prepare. It might be 10 tough years. What do you do with that? Because you cannot just wait for 10 years. You cannot say, oh, I wait until this is over.
Yeah, no.
No.
But you see, that's the thing about there's tons of opportunity in adversity,
exactly.
right? So the adversity is just more opportunity there for everyone.
Yeah, speaking of adversity, just imagine the film Titanic. Everyone gets on the boat, they cross the ocean, everyone gets off the boat. No one would want to watch that.
Yeah,
right?
Not very exciting.
That's not exciting. But we expect from life that it goes like that.
Yeah.
But life is so kind to give us a lot of obstacles, to throw a lot of obstacles on our way, and to make us overcome these obstacles.
Yeah.
And this is really where we become very creative. Very interesting in our scenario processes. Usually there's the best case scenarios. I mentioned the empathic leader. When I ask people, might be in sometimes we call like films in for the we did some scenarios recently for economic buffers, and the best one was called Tomorrowland. Everything is fine, resources are there, and supply chain is so wonderful. And when you ask people, how do you get to this best case scenario? They are, nobody says anything.
There's no path to get there.
We are not creative if there are no obstacles.
That's right.
That's so good. That's really good to see. We are not creative when there are no obstacles. Then you go to the worst case scenario that might be called something like Hunger Games. And now people get creative.
Yeah.
Or if I do that with startups, and the worst case scenario is we don't have the right product, no one wants to buy it, we did not meet our customers' needs, we have terrible suppliers, our business partners are terrible as well. Then they get very creative because they know what they have to do. They have to create a better product, they have to know about the needs of their customers, they have to find better suppliers. So it's very easy if we have obstacles. And that's very interesting about the human mind. Actually, I struggled a bit with that because I thought, are we really that stupid? We always we always need the bad things to create better things. But I'm good with it now.
Yeah. That's humanity. That's humanity. Awesome. Well,
I accepted that.
Well, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much. We should probably do this again. There's so much more we could talk about. So why don't you tell us what's the best way to get in touch with you if somebody wants to?
Yes, please go to my website, www.redswan.at. Is it turned around? Do you see it right? Or is it
no, I can see it perfectly. It's perfect. Okay. Yeah.
And if you want to read my columns, I now publish them on Substack. It's called Code Red chris.substack.com.
I love it. What a great name.
Thank you. So kind of you to say.
All
That
right.
was great fun, Chris.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Thank you.